morning. It's time for the Mike Hewitt Show, brought to you by RenegadeRiver.com. And now your host, Mike Hewitt.
Hey, good morning. Listen, we've got another packed show today. Jim Riley is in the studio with us, and you've heard Brian Thomas bring the show live. On the line with us is Carl Jarvis, who is the author of The United States of Dysfunction. Carl Jarvis, welcome back to the Mike Hewitt Show.
Thanks for having me on again, Mike.
Listen, I got to tell you, folks, Carl was on with us about a month ago, and I don't know how you felt about it, Carl, but it was kind of like hand in glove. It was a very comfortable conversation, but it went so quick that there were things that on this big list I had that I wanted to get back with you on, and so I appreciate it. I know it's a little bit early out there in the great state of Texas.
Oh no, we're fine. We're fine. Yeah, no, great to be on the show again. Thank you.
Very good. Listen, on the list of things that I had from notes, actually from I think maybe your publicist, that talks about the things that your background is strong in, is, and I'm going to read, I guess literally, it says the big difference between democracy and self-government. Carl, what are you talking about?
Well, so today all the emphasis tends to be on democracy and elections and voting, but there's so much more that goes into this great enterprise of self-government that we have in this country. And specifically, I think that if you emphasize elections and democracy too much, you get away from talking about some of the institutions that really make us a free country and make us a free people. And so if you want to just get into a couple of examples, the fact that the country is divided up into states and every state has a state legislature. I mean, some people would say that if we wanted a democracy, we should just vote for a president throughout the whole country and not have to bother with the states, right? That would be more democratic.
When I look at a democracy, I mean, first off, all of our founders' warnings come tumbling forward in my memory about mob rule, and then I look to Europe, and of course our founders warned us not to be like Europe, and unfortunately being a pure democracy makes us just like socialist economic engine-driven democracy of France, and that scares the bejeebers out of me.
Absolutely, and if you look, the mob rule analogy that you drew there is perfectly on point. That was the concern that the founders had. Certainly, if you look at a lot of this conversation that we seem to be having today about getting rid of the Electoral College, the whole thrust of that really centers around this idea that we need to be a more democratic country, that people's votes need to count equally. I saw this in a discussion of the presidential nominating process the other day, actually, where the Texas Democratic Party actually was forced to change its rules by the National Democratic Party. We can get into the details of that if you want. But one of the comments in this newspaper article that I was reading said that this is moving the system further in the direction of one person, one vote, which is this idea of equality and equal voting and democracy, and it has no reference at all to these institutional structures that really preserve the freedoms and the way of life that we have in this country.
Listen, I'm guessing that there are some folks that are driving down the road listening, going, "What's wrong with one vote, one person?" And the reality of it is that the way the republicanism, the small r republicanism, was set up to make our government drive slow, so that the government wasn't like a steely in a pinball machine, being thrown from one bumper to the next, which is what democracy tends to do. We become very reactionary, and irony being what it is, when you have a pure democracy and you've got a media as strong as we've got in the United States, who you would really have in control is the media in corporate America. And to me, that's a very fearsome way of looking at this. And I say that because we've watched how we've been able to move as a society back and forth like a pendulum from election cycle to election cycle. And so, but to me, the missing ingredient here is proper government education in high school and in elementary school, quite frankly. When we look at things like the Senate body is supposed to move slow. That's the way it was. That's what it was for. And of course, now we're demanding immediate gratification out of government, which is a fool's errand.
Wow, that you prompt so many thoughts in my mind. The thing you said about being a pendulum and swinging from direction to direction, it's such a volatile situation politically in this country today because, a new majority gets elected and people talk about how the new majority has a mandate. But even going back to the earlier point that you made about tempering these political impulses, one of the things that democracy is really not good at is decentralizing power. And the reason why is because if you just look at this example of getting rid of the Electoral College, you just have to look at that and go, what kind of centralizing effect would that have, not just on the presidential elections, but on the whole federal government structure when you're now taking all the intermediary steps out of that process, and you're just saying that everyone is going to vote for this all-powerful ruler, this executive. It becomes a very centralizing force. And the other thing that people often don't think of, you mentioned the influence of the media, and you could certainly draw a similar conclusion that democracy sort of drives us toward plutocracy because it takes so much money for these people to get elected. And maybe another example is in order here. If you look at the change that was made to how we choose senators, it used to be that the legislatures chose senators. And so in some sense, when you were electing a state rep or a state senator, you had to bear in mind that was going to influence the election of your U.S. senator. And of course, today, these senators get elected in statewide elections. But what does that really mean? That means that they're having to reach millions of voters all in one election. It means that they have to have all kinds of money. They have to raise all kinds of money. And oh, by the way, they're not necessarily raising that money from inside their own states. They raise that money wherever they can get it.
I'm not entirely convinced. Listen, I'm not entirely convinced that in the last election cycle and the one to come, the money entirely came from within the borders of the United States.
Well, and there's no rule that it has to. In fact, a lot of it comes from outside. That's absolutely true. Very,
very fearsome situation. Tell me, but one of the things I wanted to make sure I touched on when I had you is I got to segue us a little bit just because of time. One of the other things I see is the number one myth about the United States Constitution. What is the number one myth about our U.S. Constitution, Carl?
Well, in my mind, the number one myth is that the U.S. Constitution provides the complete structure of our form of government. And what I mean by that is, a lot of people, the Constitution is certainly a very important document. It has a lot of principles in it that unfortunately we don't follow today that we should. But even if you look at certain portions of it, and the provision for the election of Congress is a great example here, where all it says basically is that the state legislatures have the authority to pass laws, governing how Congress will be elected. Congress has a supervisory role in that, but it really leaves a lot of these rules and a lot of these laws up to state governments, even to an extent up to political parties. And that's the huge piece that I think people who really care about the Constitution are missing today, because that is where those things that were left out of the Constitution that have changed a lot over the history of our country, that's where we've gone off the track in the last 100 years.
Part of what's absent, though, is that, as an example, you're talking about how we used to elect a U.S. senator. But if you go to, in fact, you and I touched on this a month ago, I think. If you go to the average state assembly or state representative's weekly or monthly, whatever happens to be the case in the general region. Most of them have coffee breaks where they literally go to a restaurant. They invite constituents in to come talk to them. Most of them do it bi-monthly. And when you go to those, you'd have one or two or three, and usually the same people every single time. And I say that because, a Republican form of government, small r, a Republican form of government needs to have civil citizens that embrace civic duty. They need to be involved. They need to be aware. And if citizens were involved and were aware, then the concept that says government closest to the people works the best is how we should have exactly been still electing our U.S. senators, etc.
Right, I couldn't agree more, and I think one of the proposals that I make in the book is for people to go ahead and go out and investigate getting involved in one of the major political parties to try and influence that and make their voice heard through that vehicle. The political parties are really overlooked institutions in this country as far as giving the people a voice, giving the people this capacity for self-government, and because they're overlooked and neglected, we've really gotten away from that type of involvement that really could make a difference. On the flip side, though, if you look at how the process has evolved, it has greatly reduced the incentives for involvement because so much of this is controlled through money, through these mass elections that individual citizens can have very little influence over. And that's why in the book I say that we need to get back to thinking about how to change the process. So in the course of getting involved, it's not just getting involved to influence an immediate election, but it's getting involved in a way that it would allow us to change those rules and change the process back to a form that would allow us to better govern ourselves in this country.
Listen, I want to make sure I understood one of the points that you made. Did you indicate, or are you advocating that citizens get more involved in a political party?
That's what I advocate in the book. Yes.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is in a disclosure, I guess, and I've mentioned it from time to time on the show. I chair the 2nd District Republican Party in our area, Michigan's 2nd District. So I'm pretty involved in a party. On the other hand, I really try to balance that because I'm also with George Washington's farewell letter when he warned us about party rule. Where people would come to vote for what's best for the party before they did what's best for the Union of States. And I find those things fearsome also. So, and we see that so often where you'll find, we'll do polling. I've done polling as a consultant of a given candidate or a given incumbent, more specifically, where that person's constituency will be overwhelmingly disfavor of what that particular representative is doing, and then they'll overwhelmingly vote for that particular representative out of party rule. I find that very, very concerning.
Right. Well, and I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but I do have either that exact quote or a similar one from his farewell address in my book. And it's very interesting if you read that quote carefully because it's not just party rule that he's concerned about. It's also, or even more so, this candidate-centered factionalism, which was very, very prevalent in his day. And that's to say that you would have these factions form around wealthy patrons in his day. Today it would be around just any candidate in a primary race. And that factionalism, I mean, you can already see it happening in the Republican presidential primary and even to a lesser extent in the Democratic primary, where the only thing these candidates care about is winning. They don't care about the greater good of the party. They don't care about the greater good of the country, certainly. I mean, that's 2 steps removed from where they're at. They just want to win.
Well, let me just jump here on this. I don't, certainly very few people would disagree with the fact that politicians are more interested in getting reelected, and for some reason, the voters seem to miss that. But here in Muskegon, Michigan, just yesterday we had an election, and there were only two issues on the ballot. Both were tax, what we call millages out here. The increases in one case, a tax, an extension of another tax that was promised to expire. We have 125,000 registered voters. Only about 10,000 even bothered to come out to vote. Now, it's one thing to be enthusiastic or not enthusiastic about a political person, somebody running for office, but one would think that when you're looking at your own bottom line, be it your property taxes in your home, piece of property that you may own, if you're a renter, of course, those property taxes are going to affect what you pay. But even more importantly, if you are an employee or an employer and you own a business where the property taxes increases are going to affect you significantly, you would think that at least bottom line, we're told that those local issues really, really matter. And the reality is, here in Michigan, and I suspect it's the same in many other places, voters seem to be so disinterested. Even when it comes to their own bottom line, that tax is going to go up almost immediately if they're passed here in Muskegon. What do you do about that? I'm not interested in getting people who are not knowledgeable about issues in voting. But my golly, when you've got 6, 7, 8% of the registered voters coming out for an election that affects their bottom line, to me, that's very troubling.
That's a very interesting story. Do you know is there news yet whether it passed or not?
One of them did pass, which was the extension of a 911 telephone service. But again, that issue, when it first passed, said it's only going to be 10 years or something. Now they extended that. The other one, which was a brand new millage to support the Muskegon public schools, failed by about 100 votes.
I get a kick out of it. I got to tell you, folks, what if the Uber left set up an autocracy, mob rule, government by mob rule, and nobody showed up?
They'd win. It happened in Germany.
It's kind of where we're at right now.
It happened in Germany in the 30s.
It's true. I mean, that's what they've done. They've set up, by definition, an autocracy, and nobody's involved. The average state house race in a primary has an eligible voter turnout of about 7%. That means when you sit and think about it, listen, it's really fearsome that there are so many people that say, I don't care, you decide. Well, it kind of tells you why we're where we're at.
Indeed.
And listen, the populist rhetoric is always to bash on the elected officials. And I tend to defend them, and my reason is that they're a perfect reflection of the electorate, whether we like that or not. It's a true story.
Yeah.
Identical. I mean, like Ted Kennedy. I couldn't stand the guy, but he was elected over and over and over for decades. That's who they wanted. So, I mean, he was a reflection of his electorate. And that's true here locally also, and where you're at. It is a bottom line. The unfortunate part is that the vast bulk of the American public yawn and move on. But that same electorate is not engaged in things like Boy Scouts or church or the Masons or whatever organization or club or group you want to. They're all fighting for membership now because the majority of the population yawns and moves on and grabs their iPad and becomes very, very withdrawn and individualistic in my mind. That's how I see it.
Yeah, it's a very unfortunate situation. Of course, if you just look at the primary voting situation, so one of the proposals in my book is talks about changing the nominating process so that we would have conventions nominating elected candidates for elected office. And the objection that I always hear is that well, people aren't going to accept that because you're taking away their vote, which is not the case at all, by the way. You would still vote and choose a delegate to represent you rather than choose the candidate directly in a ballot type of situation.
Listen, Carl, I got to stop you because we're out of time.
Sure. Okay.
But let me end it by saying I'm not in favor of convention politics, and I need to have you back because we need to have a very spirited but fun debate on that topic.
And I am for it, so you bet.
Oh, we're going to be. It'll be fun. It'll be a lot of fun. Listen, how do people find your book, Carl?
Easiest way is on Amazon, United States of Dysfunction. They can find me at Carl Jarvis, Carl with a C, JARVIS.org.
Carl, thank you very, very much for joining us. We'll have you back again, and we're going to have that debate.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Yep, folks, we'll be right back.
now back to the Mike Hewitt Show, brought to you by RenegadeRiver.com, and your host, Mike Hewitt.
You're getting pretty good at that, Brian Thomas. I'm telling you.
Well, you're thank you, and you're welcome.
One little segue, man. He's got it right down. Listen, folks, we've got Matt Wiedenhoff in the studio with us, and Matt does. If you've ever watched the show on YouTube, if you haven't, watched the show on YouTube. But if you have, he puts it on there for us, and he's been. You were a guest here several times. It's been a while because you've been teaching, and the fact that he is. Do you get called an adjunct professor? Am I saying it right?
Yeah,
Good.
Adjunct.
Welcome to the show, Matt.
Thanks. Glad to be here again. It's been a while.
And Jim Riley is still sitting in here to make sure that we stay on the track.
Well, that's right. You got to make sure that you guys don't get off on the hey, I'm a professional politician track.
Isn't he wearing? He's wearing his conductor hat today, isn't he?
He is wearing his conductor hat. There it is. That's what I'm telling you.
I guess. Got a little American flag on it, baby.
I'm still trying to pronounce the word. It's aclocracy.
Okay.
Am I saying it right?
When I have questions on that, I usually go to Google, and they do have a pronunciation. That you can hear it pronounced.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if they pronounce it right. That's what it is. Anyhow, Matt, the reason I wanted you in is there's a guy named Larry Hausman who's kind of a friend of the show, and he said on a Facebook message, a guest that Jim Riley and I had interviewed a while back, he said, I really liked that guest because I like it when people are talking about positive things and things that can be getting better. And I can't think of a better person since you're an educator. You're educating the generation that's going to take leadership positions. Are you seeing good things?
Yeah, where I'm at, there's a lot of good things in terms of we got veterans coming home and they're getting the opportunity to go to school. And I'm fortunate enough to be at two universities that they really pushed and strived to create an environment for vets. And I think that's a huge, huge thing to give back to our soldiers.
Do you think that's uncommon with universities?
I do. I actually have talked to some other vets who I've just ran into when I was wearing a certain shirt or whatnot, and they asked me, hey, does that school give benefits for vets? And I'm like, yeah, they do. And they said, oh, I checked out so-and-so, and they had nothing to do with us.
When you're standing in the classroom and you're looking out well, let me start off with, how big is your class typically?
Anywhere from, depending on what kind of class it is, whether it's accounting or management, the higher end of accounting classes is maybe 10 to 15.
So small groups.
Yeah, up to 30, 35.
Okay. Yeah. And you teach accounting, is that right?
Yes.
So it's basic economics and business is what you're really teaching.
Yeah, economics, accounting, management, business.
Okay. Couple classes with each of the two universities?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just I wanted to get a feel for here. There's always a lot of consternation with old folks like Jim Riley and I, who's on his way out the door, folks. He's going old, I said. He's going kayaking. I hope someone's paddling for you.
Silver Lake, baby.
All right. Have fun, Jim Riley. Listen, there's always a lot of consternation or concern about the next generation coming up. And by the way, when I look at them, the young folks, I feel positive. And I don't think that's true across the board. But at least in this marketplace, I think that the young folks we've got coming up offer me some hope for the future. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. With some of the classes I have done, that's predominantly where I'm the youngest person in the room. And then there's others that I'm the oldest. Usually nighttime I'm the youngest and daytime I'm the oldest. There's definitely a difference and a big contrast between the way the older group think and the younger group think.
Give me examples.
The older group is more...
We like real music, and the younger group likes nasty stuff. I got that part.
Well, I'm with the younger group then, I think.
Yeah.
But
that's a fact, folks.
When you look at the younger group, they're so naive in the terms of just, they don't understand the world yet. They're bright-eyed. They think everything's just going to be great. It's going to be handed to them on a platter. And I'm sitting up there to remind them of reality. You have to work for it. Where the older group is almost pessimistic, and you have to inform them how this is going to help make things better for them. So you kind of got to go two different approaches with the older group. You're almost trying to re-energize them, so like they were when they were 18 in that room, and now you got the 18-year-old. You don't want to kill their, motivation, but at the same time, explain to them Caitlyn Jenner or something like that's not the most important thing today. There are other things going on that will affect management or your accounting or your economics, and let's pay attention to other things.
That makes sense. What do you think there's a difference in how they were raised and between the generations, or is it just a stream of Americans that are at different ages and different vantage points?
Oh, it's definitely a difference in the way people are raised in the generations. You can definitely see a difference in generation.
And really, kind of probably, I know I'm just throwing you some, and you're going, well, I don't know the answer to that. But listen, what I'm thinking, and maybe Brian Thomas will know what I'm talking about, but I'm 54. When I was young, going to a restaurant, whether it was a big boy restaurant or whatever kind of restaurant it was, that was a big deal. It wasn't something we did every single day, 2 or 3 times. I mean, it was a big event for the family to go out to dinner. And those subtle differences between what's now, and that's a norm, it's no big deal, it's like putting your hat on, you're going to go to a fast food restaurant or to a sit-down restaurant. Those little differences, I think, build different cultures. And I don't know that one's bad or good. I'm only acknowledging that there's a difference in some fundamentals. What say you, Brian?
Yeah, I'd say going out to eat was rarely like, oh, Mom doesn't feel like cooking today, we're going out to eat. It wasn't like that. It was more like it was planned, or you're on a vacation, or a get-together with other family members, or a birthday thing. It was a reward. It's like, if you do this, or if everybody gets their chores done this week, we're going to go to maybe even McDonald's or whatever, because it was a reward more than a expectation. But every day you sat down and ate dinner together. Every day, almost every day of the week, everybody was there. You were expected to be there. You weren't supposed to be late. That's how I was raised.
And I got to tell you, we've talked about this before, but to me, it goes to how the different generations see things. And what I'm getting at when I say that is my family would be talking about current news. Mm-hmm. And as a young person, I was raised up by what their views were. In the absence of those conversations, I think the young generation that are not having that daily event are, in fact, Matt, you and I have had this conversation on the air before, but those absent of that, we don't know where they're learning their views from. They're getting it from people like you at a teaching, maybe. Mm-hmm. They're getting it from music, culture, from Facebook. I saw Facebook and Twitter were the number 1 and number 2 sources of news for the generation college and down. I find that alarming, because that's not news. It's a bunch of people's opinions.
Yeah, and it's the only news they're getting is from the people they happen to be friends with or follow.
Right.
So if you're only following leftists, then it's the only viewpoint you're going to get. If you're only following the right, you're only going to get that viewpoint. You don't get both. Now, Mike, to your point, 2 things. It's funny, I was in drive-thru yesterday, and I said to my wife, I wonder if my kids get how important, like how lucky they are that we're picking up dinner tonight. I said, I remember my dad would jump us in the car and run to Hardee's because they had Pete's Shakes for a limited time. Where we do this all the time.
Yeah.
Now, I can tell you that when I was a kid, though, when my parents were together, we ate dinner together. We rarely ate out as much. Friday and Saturday night was our nights out. Otherwise, we were at home. No lunches or anything. That was all at home. But as my mom and dad separated, and my mom became the sole person who ran the business and the home, we didn't have time to cook all the time.
Sure.
So it became a lot more of pick something up, but we'd still eat together. Now, in my house, we're almost like, let's plan to cook next week. We do eat a lot of out.
You know what's
But we bring it home and eat together. But I do take the time when I'm at a sit-down restaurant, I put my phone away. Because I do feel that that's the time when I take them out to that kind of meal. We're not playing games. We're here to talk.
I ponder sometimes, where does the money come from? And I don't mean to be simple-minded when I say that. I'm being literal. When I look at wages in 1980 to now, they've doubled. But when I look at the price of a car, it's tripled. When I look at the price of colleges and universities, it's 1,000% higher than it was in 1980, and so is healthcare. And I go, I remember I owned a restaurant in the 80s, and our breakfast special was $1.99. That was in 1985. And, of course, the breakfast special is a little bit more than that. Now it's 3 times higher. It's $6.99, $7.99 in that realm. And I sit and I go, okay, I see people are doing and going a lot more than they ever did. But on the other hand, they're in debt up to their ears. And so all of this fun times we're having, is one of the reasons I think that our culture is like, it reminds me of a freight train that stops and starts, where as it slows down, all of the cars squish together, and when it tries to get going, the cars one at a time start again. And how I'm equating that, frankly, is to bankruptcies. People will max themselves right out to the hilt. They'll roll it over in their house. They'll roll it over in their house. And then they'll roll it over in their house again. And then they file bankruptcy. And I'm going, I don't know if I want to make the trade. I'm not raising my kids, and I'm spending my money from 15 years from now to go to dinner tonight. That is illogical to me. What do you think?
It is. Now, I can personally tell you, we found that if you want to eat healthy, unfortunately, it costs more. But some meals you cook at home are way more than if you go out and grab McDonald's. So there's times where we actually go, you know what? We can spend, gets a couple hamburgers and fries, spend $11 at McDonald's, or we make some big chicken and rice, and that costs us $17, plus the time, plus the energy you don't usually account into the cost.
Yeah, but I think part of that goes to planning, and listen, when I look at the planning of it, that has changed over the years. So nowadays, a lot of folks, not everybody, please don't throw darts at me, folks, but I think a lot of people plan for tonight.
Yeah.
Back when I was young and my mother went food shopping, she wasn't thinking about tonight. She was buying a week and sometimes multiple weeks of dry goods. There's a term you don't hear a lot anymore. And then picking up the incidentals along the path, like chicken or things that wouldn't store for a period of time. And also back then, I think there were a lot more chest freezers in people's worlds, which was filled with a lion's share of meat sources, so they could take advantage of deals, and they were thinking that way. And I remember coupon times and stuff like that just, now it's become a marketing deal, whereas it used to be a staple or a way of life.
And getting bushels of peaches and pears and apples and canning them.
And folks don't do that stuff. They look at you like, can? What are you going to do that for? I'm going to, extra restaurant this evening. Those things have changed, but I think that when we make these trades, first off, I ponder why. I do, and I'm being the conservative kind of feller that I am. I think that we're working for the government. I really believe that most of our wages, either directly or indirectly, are being funneled into a government for all kinds of, and I think they're terrible stewards, but that's for another show. I think we're working really, really hard. But when I look at the lifestyle that my parents had in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, they had a better lifestyle, a more fulfilling lifestyle. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for, than I'm seeing a lot of people have now. Not everybody, and I'm not being negative. That's why I wanted to talk about this generation thing, because I find it really, really concerning. I do.
It's a struggle today. I mean, as a 30-something dad of 3, entrepreneur, part-time instructor, it's a struggle. I look back and I've got into it with my mom before in terms of, she'll go, your bills are too high. I said, Mom, let's go through this. You didn't have an internet bill. Well, you didn't have an internet bill. You didn't have a cell phone bill. Well, we had a house phone. Your house phone was $10. A cell phone's $100 a phone. They've increased the bills and they've made us dependent on these things. You could not get away today and function within society. Now, if you went off the grid, you could, but you could not function today without the internet. It would be almost next to impossible. With what I do, at least with teaching and the entrepreneurship stuff, I have actually added bills that she never had and never took on in the 80s. Her cable bill, which really didn't exist in the 80s until the mid-80s probably, was $10. Cable bill today, $100.
Hey, Brian, remember when they brought in cable and they were trying to sell it? They were talking about how you'd have to pay a little, but you wouldn't have to sit through commercials and all that.
Yeah, and then also you're not worried about your antenna reception, moving your rabbit ears or whatnot. Yeah, the reception and the commercials, yes.
I think I used to enjoy TV better, to be honest with you.
Right.
Where I grew up, we had, I think, 4 channels. 3.
Well, that was the premium channels was the extra expense. That was the commercial free. I don't think they ever offered that on the regular stations. But.
The very first they did.
Okay.
At least where I came from, and but obviously that's that passed quickly.
But even back, if you think about the cost back then, I mean, it was like $15, $20 a month for a good everything but the premiums.
Yeah.
And then,
Now, on the other hand, we made less.
yeah. True.
But one of the reasons I started this segment out was to point out that our incomes have doubled. Mm-hmm. But to Matt's point about $100, what was $20 is now $100. Nothing has just doubled. Everything is 3 and 4 and 5.
But there's things we didn't we didn't have a cell phone. We had landlines, which was $20 a month, whatever.
Yeah. Plus a long distance. Which how often did you really call?
And then cable prices have gone up, and then the internet on top of that. So if you take this entertainment bill that we never had before, it's something that didn't exist back in the day, and then. Everything. So there's extra, and then what people spend on their televisions, their big screen TVs, the technology, the gadgets, everything else, and the cost of an actual cell phone if you pay full price for it. There's things that nobody paid for. We're willing and have to have this technology that was considered to Star Trek back in 30 years ago.
Yeah, that's true now. But listen, you remember Faygo the Pop?
Yes.
All right. In fact, I talked about it a week or two ago. I think I put this page together on Facebook recently. I grew up in the Pontiac area.
I love Faygo.
Yeah, and so I put this Facebook page together for old times from that era. People put pictures on, and one of the things I stumbled across when I was looking for things to post on there was an old Faygo commercial, and the guys singing, and it's a carnival atmosphere. But along with that, I stumbled on some local appliance store commercials from back then, and they were selling a 19-inch color television set that probably weighed as much as my Jeep, and it was a special deal at $237. Now, the reason I bring that up now is not everything is flipped upside down. Technology has made us, because I can go get a screen that's bigger than that weighs a fraction of that for about the same dough.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, not everything is upside down and backwards.
Right. So you're right about the prices of those things,
right,
that you just replace. But I mean, the cost of a washing machine or a dryer or a refrigerator is going way up.
Went through the roof. Toasters up like 5 or 6.
And they don't last as long. And they don't last as long. I have an old Maytag. I have my house. I've been in my house for 20 years. Okay. And my appliances were old when I got there.
Right.
And they still work.
Right. But listen, when I was young, I caught the last end of the era where people would mend things.
Right.
Now they said, don't work, throw it out and get another one. Mm-hmm. That's a whole different. To me, we've created a disposable society.
True.
Ingress, egress, everything's I want it right now and I don't want to wait. Mm-hmm. I don't want anything to get in my way. And if it's broke, throw it out and I'll get another one.
Well, that's one of the things with the students. A lot of them, they think that because they're in college, you're going to come out making lots and lots of money. And it's funny with the accounting students. Yeah. If you're a doctor, a lawyer, a dentist, a CPA, you might.
Okay.
But I'm not sure about an art history major or philosophist or, some of those aren't. But the accounting students, I get the biggest reaction out of when I tell them how many are going for their CPA. And most don't raise their hand. They're like, well, I don't really like taxes. Okay, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to do bookkeeping. Great. You're going to make $12 an hour. Their faces drop. They're thinking, no, I'm going to make about $150. No, you said you want to be a bookkeeper. That's $12 an hour. You're going to spend 4 years in school to get this degree. You're going to make $12 an hour, maybe max out at 18 over your lifetime. And they're shocked. They're like, wait, I'm going to be an accountant. No, you're not going to be a CPA.
Sorry.
CPAs make the money. You're the bookkeeper. You are not going to make that much money. And most of them are ready to drop out of the course because they don't understand it. They just think accounting, money, Most of them with their degrees think this degree means money, future, fame, fortune.
Listen, I think that's a responsibility of the colleges that are charging them outrageous fees to say this is at the end of the path that you're putting your feet on. But reminds me a little bit of like the career line tech centers or whatever they call them nowadays, where they've got a huge investment of public money into culinary class, which is teaching you how to be a fry cook when you grow up. Listen, folks, we're going to go to a break, and when we come back, we're going to do the Enigma Report. We'll be right back.
And now back to the Mike Hewitt Show, brought to you by RenegadeRiver.com, and it's time for the Enigma Report.
Listen, I'm telling you, I like the Enigma Report a lot. I really do. It seems like every once in a while, like last week we ran, so the Enigma Report was a little bit short, and we're not terrible scores for time today, but I've got some things on the plate. Just to start off with, for those folks that have not had the listen to the Enigma Report before, let me define it first. The word enigma is a person or thing that is mysterious, puzzling, or difficult to understand. And so what the Enigma Report is about is I'm looking at things in our environment, whether they're political or social, and things that I don't understand. And there's two on my list today. They're both kind of broad topics, but the first is new to me, and I guess it probably isn't new to Matt Wiedenhoff because of the environment you're plugged into, but it's new for me. The term that is an enigma to me is cultural humility. And just for those that are not familiar with it like me, cultural humility is what most of our federal government employees and many people in big corporate America, they're being introduced to the term cultural humility through classes and seminars that they're forced to sit through. And it was, remember, we wanted cultural diversity, and then we wanted cultural equality, and now we want cultural humility. And what it really means is if you're really proud of being an American, if you're really proud of your family and the culture you're in, shh, don't tell anybody. That's what it is. It is a methodology that's designed in my mind to squelch America as a culture and embrace every other culture in the world except for our own. They're literally teaching and instructing employees to embrace cultural humility. Folks, I got to tell you, I don't understand that because I'm proud to be an American. I'm ready to fight for it. I'm telling you, I don't understand how our own government could tell its citizenry to be culturally humble. Don't tell nobody. If you're proud, keep it a secret. Matt, do you see that in the university culture?
I do with some of them. Because I'm a big Reaganite. I mean, I remember growing up as a little kid watching him and American exceptionalism and feeling great about being American. And my students laugh at me because I go, they know what I am. They know how I feel. It's hard to keep it away with some of the things I teach. And I tell them, I believe in American exceptionalism. If you don't like it, too bad. We're Americans. We're the best. It's how it is.
You're not being very humble about it.
No, I never will be.
Brian, are you humble about being an American?
Oh, no, by no means.
I got to tell you, the part that really kicks me about this, the true mystery of the notion of cultural humility is that I'm 54, and when I was young, the immigrants that I knew, and I'm not even going down the illegal alien dialogue today, the folks that legally brought their families to America from wherever they came from, came here to be American. And they wanted the English language to be used in their homes, and they wanted to make sure that their children knew what it was like to be free in a society and be an American. And now it's like our own culture, people within our own culture, people that are many, many generations here, they don't want that. They're trying to tell people, when you come here, help us change it to the place that you left. And I don't understand that. The folks that are coming here from all kinds of corners of the world where they've left economic or political plight in order to find opportunity and political freedom and religious freedom. They're come here and they come here thinking, I'm going to be an American. And they're told, well, no, we're embracing your culture. We're getting rid of ours. They must scratch their head and go, what? That doesn't make any sense to me. Folks, to me, that's an enigma, that we're told not to be who we are. Well, does that make sense to you, man?
No, you know Fritz.
Yep.
He's Dutch. He's straight from the Netherlands. He's lived here for 20 years now. He's an American citizen. He was happy to be.
I still got to tell him, Fritz, slow down. I can't understand you. He's a great guy, but he loves being an American.
Yeah, in fact, the Dutch king was just here, right? And I was like, Mom, let Fritz know the Dutch king's coming. I was kind of excited, like, felt part of it. I mean, he's Dutch. We watched the Dutch team in the Olympics, and like, hey, Fritz. He goes, I don't care. How'd the U.S. do?
Yep.
I'm like, but you're from the Netherlands, man. No, I don't care.
He's an American.
How the U.S. do.
He's an American.
100%.
Imagine going through all of the... Because, listen, part of the things I do agree with the left on is our immigration policy is absolutely a train wreck.
Absolutely.
It's just insane, the amount of money and process and time. That's not how America was founded. So I agree with them on that, although I disagree vehemently on illegal immigration. That's a separate issue. But for a person from wherever they've come from to go through all of the things that they did to get here and to be legal in America, only to find that we're trying to erase our own culture, it's got to be a real head-scratcher to them. They just got to go, what am I falling into? They gotta.
Do you break up with a girl who's mean and overweight and go, I broke up with her because she's mean and overweight? Meet my new girlfriend. She's really pretty, thin, but I'm going to make her really fat and mean because I want to break up with her. Like, no. You left the place you didn't like to find the one you did like, right?
That's interesting, yeah.
I don't know that I would have used that analogy, but okay.
But I get it, though. But it seems to me that we have this issue with, we got these small segments of the population who are supposedly being made to feel bad because they're not like everybody else, or the majority.
Right.
So let's cater to the small slivers of population and change our culture to accommodate them.
Listen,
to me, that's backward thinking.
It is backward thinking, and to me, the point of a nation of laws that we're supposed to be is that we don't want the minority to rule, but we don't want to squelch them. They're supposed to be protected, but not raised up above. And I don't know if I'm saying the way I'm wanting to communicate it, but when it's not supposed to be mob rule. Mob rule would trample them. That's exactly why we wanted a Republican small r point of government. Is exactly this point, is so that the minority, especially the very small numbers of minority, so they're not trampled. But you don't say, we don't want to trample you, so we're going to erase ourselves. That's backward thinking. Listen, I'm down to a minute and a half, and I want to touch one other thing before Brian turns the microphone off. The irony of how liberals rail against big corporations blows my mind. And the reason I say there's irony in it is that when we wonder how the heck we've become so progressive as a society in such a short time, the vast bulk of the money that went into the campaigns that advanced progressivism in America came from big corporations. And it's was the lesbian and gay, what's the entire name for that organization?
Glad.
When you look at the funding from them, they got big corporate money. And by the way, I'm not making a statement for or against them. I'm saying that they're leftist in Planned Parenthood and all these people that are in the news all the time. You look at where their money's coming from. It's big corporate money. They should be loving these people, but they don't. And it goes to what Brian talks about. We need to start embracing success, not finding a way to demonize it, which is the two separate train rides. Folks, we've got to go, but find us at renegaderiver.com, and I'll talk to you next Wednesday at 9 a.m. Thanks for joining us today.